Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Nap at Home program. My name is Dawn Lilly. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote the arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatricals, dance performances, musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at the National Arts Club or find us on all social mediums. Tonight's program, the reconstruction of a unique Baroque opera ballet, will be followed by a question and answer. So that if you have questions, please put them into the chat box and Laura Daly will take them and handle them at the end of the presentation. Catherine Turocy, who's the artistic director of the New York Baroque Dance Company, and James Richman, the artistic director and conductor of the Dallas Bach Symphony, are the very qualified presenters for tonight's program. Catherine, a dancer, choreographer, director, performer, and dance historian. Jim is a performer on the harpsichord and the pianoforte, is an opera director, and is a conductor of Baroque music. Both have received the Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters from the Republic of France, and they have worked together for over 4 decades. And it's a pleasure to turn the program over to them.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for a wonderful introduction. I would like to thank the National Arts Club for this invitation to present our work, and happy Hanukkah for those who are observing. And on this Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, we're so grateful to the generations before us who defended freedom and peace. And on the same subject, we're going to go now to a presentation. I'm just going to share my screen for Marc uh, Antoine Charpentier's work, Les Arts Florissants, which we spoke about. And here I've just pressed share and it should be coming up. Yes, at this moment. Unfortunately, it seems to be not quite complete. So let me just do this one more time. I'm sorry. Of course, we had a rehearsal just before this. And
There it is.
there it is. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Share screen. And let's go here. Yes, the technical part is so interesting to me. Right. And we're just going to go ahead to the slide and from the beginning. So this should activate us. I am just going to do one click here and see if it's a problem.
No, there it is.
Ah, there we go. Yes, so we're going to be presenting Marc Antoine Charpentier's Les Arts Florissants, an exquisite gem of the day. And Jim, I'll ask you to take over.
Okay, this is a work which we've performed several times, going back several years. And it's a favorite because it's just so perfect in its own way. Charpentier was a French Baroque composer, and his works have become more and more known, but he's still not a household word by any stretch of the imagination. So to get into the context of what we're talking about, the story of music and dance in 17th century Europe is one of the development of all kinds of new forms and new traditions, and new ways. Uh, Inasmuch as science changed everything in the 17th century, the Earth was no longer the center of the universe, and the spherical nature of everything turned into ellipses. All the science was changing things, and music changed along with it. And the harmony of the spheres of Palestrina, the perfect counterpoint for sacred music, was overthrown in a sense by this new idea of declamation, of recitative, and of admitting love as a topic worthy of serious music. And thus we get the period that is now known as the Baroque. The French never refer to this music as Baroque. For them, it's classical music. And the most important part of that was the invention of opera. And opera became, of course, the word just means the work, because it contained everything: singing, dancing, staging, painting for the sets, poetry, of course. So it combined all the arts and it spread all over Europe. Italy became the source of all things Baroque. And in particular, this musician and dancer named Giambattista Lully moved to Paris and under the name Jean-Baptiste Lully became this most important figure in the history of music, especially in France. And he was an organizer and a great macher, as we would say. And it is here that our story begins. And if we can get to
It may
page,
end.
how about page down?
I'm sorry. There we go. We just had to get the cursor in the right place.
Okay, there we go. This is a engraving of Mignard's portrait of Lully, in which he is identified as secretary of the king and superintendent of his music. And this, of course, is King Louis XIV, so the most important king of all. And the little poem underneath the picture, if you can see it, says, "Let us no longer be told about Orpheus, because Louis, with his glory, surpasses Orpheus." So this is a totally normal Baroque exaggeration, and especially the combination of Italy and Louis XIV created almost a monster. I mean, Louis is such an important figure, and the king granted him a royal patent for opera, which forbade anybody else from writing opera in France, and that was defined as 8 singers and 8 instruments. So what we find is that people like Charpentier, when they wanted to write these chamber operas, used exactly 8 singers and 8 instruments. There was no particular ban on the number of dancers, but of course that does set the kind of stage for what's allowable. Charpentier, in fact, outlived Lully, so eventually the patent didn't apply to him anymore, and he wrote full operas, which were done at the Académie Royale after he left the service of Mademoiselle de Guise.
How did people experience music and dance? While the church and the ballroom remained the principal venues for music and dance, the popularity of opera in many countries vastly expanded the audience for presentations that were far grander and more sumptuous than the ballroom. In Italy, public theaters opened in the first half of the century, where one could simply buy a ticket to enjoy what had previously been only available in exclusive venues. With the founding in 1661 of the Académie Royale de Danse, followed by the Académie Royale de Musique in 1669, opera was established in France. Public performances were all the rage. In the German principalities, local princes imitated the practice at the Palace of Versailles, producing opera in court theaters and their palaces. Opera theaters were also established in London, Stockholm, and other capitals. Similarly, various nobles put on operatic performances in their homes for friends and family, employing artists who belonged either as dedicated specialists or as convenient servants. For example, the butler, who also played the violin. And this is the case for Les Arts Florissants. I just wanted to pop in to take a look at Versailles in 1668. Of course, not all the homes in Paris, the townhouses in Paris looked as extravagant as this, but I just wanted to show you the grand scale. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that he not only made this Versailles for beauty, but also there were practical reasons. For instance, this canal, which goes all the way back to join a river, this canal was not only used for gondolas and pleasure rides, but Louis XIV and his ministers of war would try out their model ships to see how they would work in battle. So these model ships were usually about 3/4 the size of a real ship, or maybe a bit smaller. He also did a lot of work with fountains, and in Les Arts Florissants, you'll hear a reference to water running uphill. So they were really developing the latest technology for carrying water to urban areas and also for irrigation. Jim, did you want to say anything more about the Versailles or?
Well, Versailles, of course, is unique, and in addition to the main axis that we're looking down, there was a side-to-side axis. As you can see, the gardens are symmetrical, and that line crosses the main axis in the king's bedroom, right about there. And this, of course, is important in a monarchy because in a monarchy, the king's bedroom is in fact the center of government. It's where the next king's going to come from, of course. And so when Louis took this little hunting lodge and made this unbelievable palace out of it, that uh, was part of the design, part of the whole idea. And of course, there's no theater per se here, but in these gardens and in the Grande Écurie, which are some of these buildings in the front, sometimes theaters were improvised and fairly large works could be performed. The lady that you see in the picture here is Louise. I'm sorry, did I have that wrong? Marie de Lorraine, I'm sorry, who's known as Mademoiselle de Guise. She was, after the death of some ancestors, the inheritor of several titles and an incredible amount of money, and she became one of the richest people, certainly one of the richest women in France. And she kept a musical establishment going in her townhouse in the Marais, which featured Marc-Antoine Charpentier as her sort of house composer, and he wrote 500 works for her, which are all nicely bound in some volumes that have found their way to the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. If you go to France and visit Paris today, and you go to the archives, the National Archives, that's her house. And of course, it doesn't serve private affairs anymore, but it was made into the National Archives after the Revolution. Les Arts Florissants, like everything else there, was performed by her musicians, and it was pretty much for the private enjoyment of the Duchess and her friends. And the names of the singers are in fact specified in the score. We don't know precisely why it was written, but it was clearly a celebration of Louis XIV's success as a warrior and as a patron of the arts. And the idea, of course, is that peace is what allows the arts to flourish. And then when war and discord come, everything is distracted and upset, and chaos is introduced. And it's only when order comes back that the arts once again can flourish. So everything in this work is about war versus peace, and how peace will win, as it were, but not forever, because envy and darkness and despair and discord are also immortal, will always be with us. Charpentier, as a musician, is an almost the exact opposite of Lilly. He was content to work in the Duchess's house for, I believe, 17 years. And while Lilly's portrait was painted by Mignard, who was the greatest painter in Paris, this is all we have of Charpentier. It's from a little corner of an engraving where there are probably 30 or 40 people, and he's holding the corner of a piece of music that's being held by the Duchesse de Guise. So her ownership, in effect, of Charpentier and his works is referred to in this engraving, and he's holding onto the corner the way the composers always do in these pictures. If you look at Bach's portrait, for instance, he's holding onto one of his cannons, and in Couperin's, it's called the happy ideas that he's holding. So it was tradition for the composer to indicate his works, but this is a totally different kind of person. There's no bombast here. It's just one beautiful moment after another, and it creates a very pure and lovely music that we find just completely glorious. Um, Taste, this all the French talk about, le bon goût, good taste, and how that rules everything. So uh, you have, despite the fact it's a totally different personality, he too was attracted to the idea of opera. And although he couldn't write opera because of Lully's patent, he did as much as he could with the 8 instruments and the 8 singers that were allowed. And after Lully died, he did write Alcyone and Médée and bigger works that went into the actual opera house. I think the next thing we wanted to do was let you hear a little bit of this music so that you know what we're talking about in terms of Charpentier's uh, well, his art. Um, the solo characters, which are music, architecture, painting, poetry, and the like, form the chorus when he needs one because there's a limitation. There aren't enough people to have a chorus. So they just become the chorus. And he writes 5 and 6 part music, which everybody sings with one to a part. Everybody's a soloist. And they become arts and furies and whatever is needed just as things go along. This excerpt is from the beginning of the work, and it praises music, who of course is for Charpentier the most important of the arts. And as you can see, the text here, beloved of heaven and earth, soul of the universe, delight of the spirit. And then linking the elements together. In other words, the entire universe is joined and made reasonable by the arts. And what war does is it disturbs all this. When discord comes out, the first thing he says is that the air and the earth and the seas are all going to be discombobulated. I don't know what kind of word to use, but basically thrown into chaos. And so this little lick that we're going to play for you of a minute or so, it starts on the text, after the fearful sound of war's thunder, how charming it is to hear your heavenly sound.
Yes. Okay, ready. And here we're going to go and hear the music. Voila. So, what is the story? Singers depicting the allegorical characters of music, painting, architecture, and poetry are shown flourishing under the beneficent and peaceful reign of Louis XIV. They and a group of dancer warriors become drawn into a dispute between the central characters of La Paix and La Discorde. After a brief struggle in which Discord and her furies gain the upper hand, Peace appeals to Jupiter to intervene on her behalf. Discord and her followers are chased back into the depths of Hades by a hail of thunderbolts, and peace holds sway once more. And as Jim said before, in Baroque opera and classical literature, discord and the furies are never completely destroyed because, alas, they are immortal and will always be with us. This turned out to be a libretto for our time. The invasion of Ukraine began February 24th in 2022. Our audience on March 11th experienced Les Arts Florissants within the context of this war. The poetry of the libretto took on a deeper meaning as peace, restoring the flourishing arts, brought tears to the audience with her closing aria, followed by the final plea of the chorus. Far from the din of battle, generous warriors. You shall live without war, pursuing harmless delight. I call you to tranquil repose. The pleasures that pour from my hands after the horrors of bloody warfare are worthy of the greatest of heroes. And the chorus. O peace so long desired, how sweet are your fruits. You who restore the golden age of Saturn and Rhea, dwell among us always. And this reference to Saturn and Rhea is the reference to the Titan. Yes,
Titans, yeah.
Titans.
The generation before the current gods, Jupiter and Aphrodite and Hephaestus and Ares, when things were supposedly a little more peaceful and steady and sort of eternal, the current gods are constantly at one another. Not exactly a guarantee of peace, but this was the idea of an age before them when everything was
More ordered,
more
I
ordered.
guess.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. This next piece, Reci La Paix, she's going to enter, confront discord and the Furies. She will call upon Jupiter, and then she will be able to conquer chaos.
You can see from the setup here that the musicians, as they would have been in a place like the Salon of Mademoiselle de Guise, are sort of over on the side, and the area for playing is defined in this instance by the columns, and the excitement really is as much in costuming as in the set at this point, because you couldn't have much of a set in these salons. Uh, but we use the columns as a marker for
Well, it's helping to give it a little bit more depth.
and symmetry of the stage area.
Right. The poetry at that time, the poetry of the opera was really of great importance. The music was written to help to illuminate the poetry, and of course, the dance obviously takes in the sense of rhythm and meaning. So let me just read the libretto. We don't have, we did have surtitles in the performance, but with the video, uh, we weren't able to capture the surtitles. They're going to have to be placed in. So this is really a video from the performance. It's not made for the theaters. All right. Peace comes in and she says, daughter of eternal night. So that would be discord, who feels a terrible pain from the peace that Louis assures the universe. Go remove your criminal band and fall back with them to the depths of hell. No, says Discord, weakling goddess. Injuries, no, weakling goddess, injurious peace. No, before I return to my dark abode, despite Louis, despite his glorious projects, I will saddle his subjects with tasks without reprieve and with suffering that knows no limits. Peace responds, as long as this generous hero gives me harbor in his empire, despite the evil design that your rage inspires in you, none of these evils will befall them. And Discord says, turmoil, treason, fury, vengeance, rage, break forth and enter men's hearts, spread horror and carnage everywhere. And then Peace says, great Jupiter, how can you endure these monsters without reducing them to dust? What are you doing in heaven? Have you forgotten your thunderbolts? Ah, now I hear them rumbling in the air. Of course, there's a lot of rumble, rumble. Daughter of eternal night, who feels a terrible pain from the peace that Louis assures the universe, go, remove your criminal band, and fall back with them to the depths of hell. And here we go. Okay, this is where, I'm sorry, technical problem with the box being, let me see if I can just move it, Jim. Oh my gosh. I will try this.
Can't start the video.
One moment. That might help. Uh,
Box.
yeah, so I'm just gonna try and move this box. There, it worked. Here we go. James.
Of course, the context for people in 1685 would have been these wars that were going on. War was, in a way, kind of constant in those days. I don't know, I suppose in a sense it's constant today, depending upon how you want to think about it. But in any event, these were important battles. On the right side, you see the Great Turkish War, and this is a scene where the central character, the King of Poland, Jan Sobieski, repelled the Turks at the gates of Vienna, and he led a charge of 20,000 horse, which is supposed to be the greatest cavalry charge in history, and it did turn the tide of battle. From that point on, the Ottomans were in retreat until they were finally chased out of Europe completely at the end of the 19th century. The left side, you can see at the bottom the Tripolitanian War, which is the same war that Thomas Jefferson had with the pirates in Tripoli. Jefferson didn't understand why a brand new country like America that never offended anyone should be suffering piracy and all that. But I guess he didn't really understand that as far as the Muslims were concerned, they were just another example of European treachery and enmity. So, at any rate, the French apparently took care of the Barbary pirates to the extent that the the Bay of Tunis, surrendered without a fight later on. These are, of course, all paintings that you can find in various museums showing all these, well, fabulous wars. What do we got next now? Ah, yes. This is a fortification that Louis XIV built on the coast of Normandy that was actually used still in World War II. So I guess some things just last forever.
We have to continue to be thankful that these fortifications were there when we needed them. It's amazing how the past does affect the
The next clip we have for you is the scene with architecture on the left and painting on the right. You can see his palette and brush, and she's got a little temple, which is a symbol of her. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for? In any event, uh, she sings to him, "Let us join forces wise painting to preserve his deeds for all time." This is, of course, Louis XIV. And she says, "In a sterile desert where nature does her best to thwart my efforts, I will raise a palace for him, whose noble structure reveals and proclaims the riches within. Overcoming every obstacle, I will make rivers flow uphill, creating gardens to charm the eye, and 1,000 fountains rising to the vaults of heaven." And painting replies, "It is only by great masterworks, it is only in creating miracles that we can please Louis. Just as he only arrives at victory by the most unheard of means, we must create masterpieces." So this is in the recitative style, of course, just between these two characters who you've already seen as Furies in the chorus because they just had to do double duty.
The dance and opera ballet, what a great subject I like to talk about. Our production of Les Arts Florissants aims at realizing the original concept of an ultimate artistic synthesis, where the combination of many art forms leads to a total sensual and intellectual experience. In the Baroque period, opera ballet was music theater at its most complex, which drew upon the extant tradition of dramatic and musical improvisation, lyric poetry, stage machinery, and the various forms of music and dance composition. We are not clear on the stage directions or physical setting for the stage for Les Arts Florissants, or the names of the dancers or the choreographer. Dancers ranged from talented nobility to, as mentioned in some records, the daughter of the gardener. They did not necessarily hire professional dancers to come in for their entertainment at home. But nonetheless, it was still very sophisticated because people started dancing at age 5 and tried to hone their talents in the arts, whether it was music, dance, poetry. In this production, the dance roles depict warriors, furies, and followers of peace. The music alternates between vocal, instrumental, and dance music, and with the poetry of the libretto, artistically expresses the desire to make art, not war. Indeed, even the founding papers of the Académie Royale de Danse state that when soldiers are not serving the king at war, they will be dancing in the ballet. Houses such as the Hotel de Guise sometimes created a temporary stage for their productions, as did the Palace of Versailles when they used the Grande Écurie or the gardens. Creating choreography, yes, because it's not put down. Most of the musical scores for opera ballet do not have corresponding dance scores. Hence, today's choreographer must make a deep study of published dance treatises and dance notations, and also gain an understanding of the movement style through period painting and sculpture. Chief sources of dance notation are the collections of ballroom and theatrical dances published by Raoul Angers Feuillet in 1700 to 1704 and by Monsieur Gaudreau in 1712. The notation system records the step units, floor patterns, and correlation between music and dance measures. Although a notation and description of the hand gestures exists, the dances are rarely notated with their corresponding hand gestures. Consequently, these must be choreographed into the dance. Theatrical dances, which employ contrasts in dynamics and phrasing and stylized gestures in the development of a character, call even more directly from the choreographer as a dramatist.
I'd just like to say that this notation is very wild because it's really as strong as music notation. It doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you the steps, which is almost everything. Musical score doesn't tell you everything either. It just gives you the notes and some general directions on what to do with them. So they're very similar, but dance notation of this precision sort of went out of style around 1800, whereas music somehow survived in its just got more complicated and it's hard to see how anything could get more complicated than this dance notation. I'm always fascinated just to look the idea that each of those little patterns is one step and it tells you every single thing that the toe is doing in the heel and how it's landing.
Thank you for your appreciative comments, Jim. And I'm amazed by your music. Let us go on. We're going to see the finale with the dance and chorus. And this finale, basically, the ideas behind it are what were expressed in the beginning when we talked about the libretto, where its afterpiece has made her aria, and the chorus is asking for peace to dwell with us. And in this cut, in the performance, there was quite a silence after the end of the dance, as the audience took it all in. And as I said before, there were tears in eyes, and there was just a kind of hush. So in this edit, you're not going to hear the applause that happened. You're just going to hear the silence. And I'm looking for my cursor. Yes, here we go. And as we look at the final scene, we have the characters of the Furies coming in at the end, reminding the audience that envy, chaos, discord are never far from us. I'm taking this last pose as a reflection of the paintings of the time, where you usually have the most important person in the center, and that's where the light is shining. And then as you go off to the edges, the characters in the paintings are normally referring to others in the picture or to you, the viewer. In this case, we have the orchestra here, and in this case, we have the Furies. Jim, do you want to say something about the recording that you're working on?
Yes, the we made a serious studio recording. This is, of course, a recording of an actual performance, which is it's actually pretty good, but it's never as good as something that's worked over. Um, in
Well, the quality of the sound for the articulation of the words is much clearer on a recording than you can get from making a video.
Exactly, and it's really quite good for video recording, uh, and it was a real treat to go back and to do it as we wanted, and with a second chance, even now and then. You can see the cast, the vocal parts are given in their French form, dessus, meaning the above, which is the soprano part. Haute contre, the high counter is a sort of countertenor, but it's not really. It's just a really high tenor. And that was the heroic uh, part a lot of times in French opera. And in this case, that role of painting, La Peinture, was sung by Charpentier himself in the performances. Architecture is the bas dessus, the low high, so a mezzo soprano in our terms, or alto. And then you also see for discord a taille, which is a lower kind of tenor. And again, this question of if it's La Discorde and La Bellone, who's the goddess of war, why are they sung by men? And that partly has to do with the idea of things being in the wrong place. We're upsetting the seas and the land and the air with war, and the sexes get mixed up as well. So in this case, the person you saw singing discord was, of course, the tenor, but it's La Discorde. And then, of course, Peace is a soprano. Um, and the instruments, like I say, they had exactly the 8 instruments. And it's a very specific group. And he used exactly the same 8 instruments for a sonata, which we played as the sort of first half to this concert, and which will also be on the CD. And we hope to come back and give you some CDs in a few months.
I'd just like to go on and as we're reading the supporters, just to say that in putting this together, usually it takes it takes a month to put the choreography together and to coach it. And then eventually we get together with the singers, with the stage direction. The singers are guided in period style movement, and it's the weaving of these visual styles of movement for the singer and for the dancers that I think makes this artwork so beautiful. And then, of course, we have been practicing to music ahead of time, but we finally have our orchestral rehearsal where everything is put together, and then the excitement of the performance. Well, I think probably Nadine or Laura is going to come in at the moment. Maybe I need to stop sharing, possibly, because I
Yes,
think.
yes, please stop sharing and let, I mean,
Yeah, no, I know. Oh dear. Okay, this
well,
is
it's
let me
fine.
try
It's
this.
fine. People can still hear us, and so for the Q&A, it's quite all right.
Okay,
Um,
I
all
think
right, so one question is all of the singing that we heard in your presentation, was the pitch the original pitch?
To the best of our knowledge, yes.
Okay.
Pitch was not as high as it is today.
Mhm.
And a sort of modern approximation to Baroque pitch is down 1/2 step, so that when you play an A, what we're hearing is a modern G sharp.
Right. Okay.
It's an A415.
Mhm.
Uh, that's a little bit of a compromise. It's very easy on the harpsichord to just take the keyboards and just move them one step over, and then you can have high pitch and low pitch. Sometimes
Mhm.
there's even a super low pitch. But uh, if one was to be completely, uh, I don't know what the word is, but it's a little crazy to try to figure out whether 408 or 409 or 411. It was probably a tiny bit under 415, but that's not the biggest difference. The difference between 440 and 415 is huge. Uh,
Huge.
yeah, and so that does make a difference. And the singers have a much easier time actually at this pitch, especially the high tenor parts and the really high soprano parts. Uh, when you do the super low pitch, which I happen not to be a fan of, then the basses suddenly have to sing a low F all the time.
Yeah, yeah, they're in the basement, and that's just,
And yeah, you know, then there were a Russian chorus, and that's not likely to have been the way it was. So the half step is probably more or less correct. And, we know things moved up a little bit, and Handel's operas may have been more like 422, and we know that Mozart's pitch was 435 or 438. And you know, we try to approximate these things, but the problem is then you have to recreate woodwind instruments of all these different pitches. So having at least some compromise that we're going to use makes some sense in
yeah,
practicality.
it's great. Can you talk a little about Charpentier's collaboration with Moliere?
Well, yes, Molière and Charpentier did do several uh, productions together. Catherine, you probably know more
Oh,
about
I just want to say, yes, but let's talk about Bourgeois Gentilhomme because that's where the fighting happened.
Uh-huh.
In Bourgeois Gentilhomme, we've got Moliere and Lully. Moliere sees it as a play. So you make this whole play, there's some dance things in it, and then you get to the end of the play. And of course, Lully has written the music for the dance within the play. But then Lully has the Ballet des Nations. So
Mhm.
he has a ballet that follows this whole play. The ballet is almost as long as the play. So I feel like it was a sort of a fight between just two giants about who was going to be owning the title place of what Bourgeois Gentilhomme was. Perhaps this is why he did not, why Lully did not stay and write many more music for the plays of Moliere. So the Moliere and Charpentier um, join joining to produce things together. I think they were just more of a harmonious, two
it. Yeah,
artists of more harmonious tastes.
Charpentier was more harmonious just in general than no, that's probably the main thing. The interesting thing is that in the 18th century, they tried to get together uh, Rameau and
Voltaire.
Voltaire, and they tried one production together, and it so didn't work that everybody gave up on the idea of yet
Uh,
another Molière, Charpentier, Molière Lully collaboration. Uh, Things got a little too specific by then.
Thanks. Next question is, to what extent was Charpentier's works influenced by his contemporary Racine?
Well, um, I think it's best to talk about the musical influences on Charpentier. And one of them, there's an Italian composer named Carissimi, who again is not terribly well known, but was a great composer for the late 17th century. You know, we're no longer in the period of Monteverdi or Caccini, and Carissimi was he used the voices in the sort of same way,
Mm.
and Purcell is also hooked in to this because they write in this beautiful harmonic way with all these individual voices projecting, and um, not the glorious opera of Lully, and it's not the 18th century, which then takes things into a much crazier uh, world of harmonies that are unheard of and changed. So we're still in easy to understand harmonies, and yet Charpentier produces really, really beautiful things. There's a saraband in this piece that's just two violins and a bass, and it's the simplest thing ever, and it's just gloriously gorgeous. And it takes so much. Well, to write something simple and perfect is the hardest thing in the world, and that's what I think that's why we like Charpentier so much, because he managed to
Um, our next question is, Lully was notoriously difficult person to get along with. How did Charpentier and other composers cope?
Well, they didn't. They basically had to do what Lily did, because Lily was, it's the I'm Jean Baptiste Lily and you're not kind of situation. But Mademoiselle de Guise was not anybody to be toyed with, so of course Charpentier was completely taken care of, and there was no question of him being threatened or anything like that by Lily. But Lily had the king's ear and the king's purse, and that's really all he needed. The kind of interesting thing is that Lilly, who made his life by the opera, died when, at the beginning of one of his productions, they used to bang the stick on the floor 3 times to start the theater, same like ringing the 3 bells to start mass. And the story is that Lilly managed to get his toe on the last hit and developed gangrene and died. So yeah, exactly. He didn't live all that long. He lived into his late 50s, I believe. Uh, and so the other composers were relieved of this burden, like accidentally. But in a way, it's kind of poetic justice, I guess. No, they didn't. They didn't have any way to fight back, and they just had to find their path, as it were.
So one thing that I was curious about is Charpentier never achieved a position at the French court. And so I'm wondering if his connection with Madame de Guise had anything to do with that.
Well, she was huge as a figure at the time. I mean, if you counted the 5 or 10 most important people in France, she would have been up there.
He'd be
So
there.
to say that he didn't have a place is not really fair. He did. He had a fabulous place, and she wasn't Louis XIV, and I thank God for that. She seems to have been a very thoughtful and intelligent lady, and uh, also pious. She had him write tons and tons of beautiful religious music, which is being dug up and performed now more and more. Um, there's some fabulous Christmas music when everybody says it's time to go to Bethlehem, and it's sung sextet of "Let's Go, Let's Go." It's you know amazing
Um,
music.
I also think that it wasn't such a wonderful experience to be living at Versailles. There were close to 3,500 people living there under the thumb of Louis XIV. And as Jim mentioned earlier, that Charpentier's nature was more subdued. He was not, somebody who was out there and wanted to make it and social climb. So it probably would have been, I think, a pressure on him to be there. And frankly, I'm not sure that I'd want to live in a place with 3,500 other people. I think I'd rather have just the 20 or 30 people at the home of
Madame de Guise.
Mademoiselle de Guise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all those people were just striving for status and who would get an invitation to this or who would play cards with that, and that's a particular kind of person. And Louis kept almost the entire French nobility there. If you were Duke of Marseille or something, you would be at Versailles, where he could keep you under his thumb. Uh, so central government really was
Well, I think that helped.
enforced there.
I also think that Louis's love of performances, putting together spectacles, employing uh, the nobility in these roles kept them probably distracted from wanting to have these smaller battles over land and things like that. So in a way, it was the arts were his way of keeping the peace within the kingdom.
Let's see, we have one last question. Are the Furies always controlled or subservient in the Baroque, or did they have to wait for the Romantic era with interest in the dark side?
Well, the Furies, in terms of the dance choreography, normally they were people who were both balletic and gymnastic. So you
Mhm.
would get them doing cartwheels, doing some kind of flips, doing some kind of like, pyramid of people and then fall down. It was pretty wild. Also, improvisation was a large part of the performance, especially for the Furies when you're trying to emphasize a sense of spontaneity and chaos. So we have to understand that I think the dancing that you saw was more in the noble style. The
Mhm.
dancing that we saw in this video was after peace came. We didn't have time to show everything.
Yeah.
So we missed the dance of the Furies, but yes, there was a cartwheel and many pirouettes and things like that.
It's
How, oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead,
No, I
Jim.
was just going to say that uh, things aren't things are so crazy nowadays. It's a little bit hard sometimes to figure out exactly what would have been considered crazy in a different period. Um, but there are even things like 5-bar phrases in the music that indicate that things are not right.
Mm.
So you can also find that kind of notion in portrayal of Furies and such characters.
So actually, my mistake. One last question. So, how did the Baroque music and dance, the entire package, both define and illustrate life at the French court?
Well, that would be another lecture.
Okay. All right.
No, 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 no.
Uh,
It's
but it did define it. Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
well, you know, the desire for glory to be the best was very, very strong at this period. And one of the things that obsessed the French was whether they were surpassing the ancients, the Greeks and Romans, because that work had now become much more known and people measured themselves against it. And there was this great argument going on of the ancients versus the moderns. And finally, at the end of the 17th century, it was more or less decided that the period of the ancients overall was greater, but that the 17th century, the century of Louis XIV, was greater than any particular century in the ancient world. So that's how they managed to tie this all together and make something neat out of it. But they were very, very, very serious. There's so many different plays and so much music, and of course the dance was considered a science at this point. Um, it's People lived for the arts way more than they do now, I'm afraid, and they were just a daily diet for everybody. Um, and they were all tied together. The opera wasn't known as opera in French; it was known as tragédie lyrique, sung tragedy, sung theater. So they had this different point of view, um, but always with the idea of tying it all together and making something fabulous. And if you go to Versailles and just walk around the place, you see incredible painting and sculpture that's in effect only decorative, but it's really great. And when you go into the Hall of Mirrors, which of course is the grand ballroom of the whole business, with now the restoration of the gold leafed statues and all the chandeliers, and when you light with candles in the evening, the tourists get to go in the afternoon. But that's not the point of the Hall of Mirrors. When you're at 9 or 10 p.m. with a couple of thousand candles going in this room with all the chandeliers and the gold and the ladies' silken dresses and the jewelry and the men's jewelry as well and their outfits, it must have just been, I mean,
Magnificent.
yeah, we had a chance to go to a party, and even in modern dress, this was really a very, very different space than it is during the daytime. And same thing when you go to St. Mark's in Venice with all those tiles and the gold. When you see it at night, lit up, and it's like you're in a magic jewel box. And the whole mirrors in Versailles is very much the same thing. And then, of course, outside the fountains, and then the fireworks, and everything is just incredibly brilliant. And that was the whole idea. It's just this brilliance.
The world was a stage.
Oh, yes, yeah, too bad. For the good old days. Catherine and James, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. Dawn, thank you for spearheading this event, bringing it to fruition. And I want to thank our audience for being here. And I want to wish everyone happy holidays and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.